Imagine not being allowed out of your home except for a few hours a day. Imagine not being allowed internet access or even a computer in your own home. What if you weren't able to work and had to account for every penny you spend? Well, these are just some of the examples of rules which have been imposed on dozens of Muslims in the UK since 2005. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Absent Justice with me, Muazzam Beg. This week, we look at control orders, a now defunct anti-terror measure which is placed on individuals the Home Office deems to be dangerous, but seemingly not dangerous enough for them to be tried or put in prison. They are made up of a number of rules which these individuals must live by or risk up to 5 years in prison. Some rules may include wearing a tag, not exceeding a geographical boundary, and having to register with either a monitoring company or their local police station. Due to widespread controversy, the orders have now been replaced by TPIMs, which are essentially the same thing. First, here's a report by Huria Al-Haddad.
Control orders, which were enforced across the UK up until last year, have always been a controversial part of anti-terror legislation. Some say the measures, which were made up of a series of restrictive rules, were akin to house arrest, but not much is known about the people who are on them. To find out more, a couple of years ago, Islam Channel tracked down a Muslim man living on similar strict anti-terror bail conditions. He's since been relocated, but last time we spoke to him he was based in the north of England. Because of his bail restrictions, we couldn't reveal his exact location or even pre-arrange the meeting, a breach which could have potentially landed him up to 5 years in prison. At his request, we disguised his identity.
You have to be fitted with a tag 24 hours, and you have curfew hours, 20 hours curfew. You are allowed out for 4 hours a day. Really, I don't have a life at all. You know, a human being is like a social kind. I don't have this social life. You feel like being exiled somewhere. You are not allowed to get to amenities. What I mean by amenities is shops, even coffee shops, where you can stand and have a coffee. You are not allowed to go there. For example, cinema, swimming pool, the normal things that a human being can do.
The detainee, who's originally from Algeria, previously served a total of 5 years in prison without charge on terror-related allegations. He says despite being freed, he's still living like a prisoner in his own home.
I don't have any hope. Really, it's just hopeless. Maybe in the beginning you try to fight, try to say that there is hope somewhere, but in reality, there isn't. There isn't.
Control orders have now been replaced by TPIMs in an effort to help quell criticism of this controversial anti-terror measure. But many have said TPIMs are essentially the same thing, while SIAC bail orders, which are mainly used for foreign nationals, are much worse.
Well, I'm pleased to be joined by Kaleem Bullivant, a former control order detainee, and Bruce Kent, a veteran peace activist and political campaigner. Welcome to you both. Kaleem, let me first ask you, of course, you'd spent time on a control order and prior to that was detained under secret evidence in Belmarsh. I don't really want to talk to you so much about your own personal experience, but if you can just give me a snippet of what it's like to live under a control order, the effect of it on your life and on your psyche, on your mind.
The thing about control orders is they're designed in such a nefarious way, and this is TPIMs as well, that they seep into every single aspect of your life. They seep into your private life, your personal family relationships, into work and education, into your relationships with the people in the community around you. And this all-encompassing sort of crushing feeling that everywhere you look and everywhere you turn, there's always a condition about this and a condition about that, and you're constantly worried about breaching it, and you've got this 5 years hanging over you, all on the basis of secret evidence, and it becomes a mental prison for you. And for example, when I was in prison, all of the people that were there on control orders ended up in healthcare suffering from depression and other problems because of the extreme mental anguish and pressure that you're put under living under these conditions.
Now there are some aspects to all of this which I want to talk to you about, to you, Bruce, and that is that you've been involved in the campaign for helping people like, for example, Mustafa Talib, who you visit, and others who were on control orders prior to that, but now are on deportation orders. People often get confused in terms of the terminology, but in essence, the control order or the deportation order or the TPIMs, which are the terrorism preventive investigation measures, in essence, are all based upon one thing: secret evidence.
Now, secret evidence, and the difference is nationality. Control orders, British citizens. Deportation, they want to get rid of them. And it's all on secret evidence, everything.
And having visited Mustafa and seen and discussed the effects of the deportation order on him, what do you think is the most difficult thing that he has to face?
I think loneliness is probably, if you're unable to go out at certain times, you can only meet registered people who've been approved. You can't risk being late from any appointment. You've got to be there running, even physically running back to make sure you're on time. I think it's the isolation, really. It must be absolutely awful. And the uncertainty of the future, because this goes on and on through appeal, European court, and then God knows what else. And at the end of the line, if that fails, deportation back to a country which has done quite horrible things.
Now, in Mustafa's case in particular, he was, of course, accused initially of being part of the Ricin plot, which never existed to begin with, and, of course, was not charged and not convicted of anything to do with that. But I remember having visited him once in Bedford, where he'd been placed as part of his control order. I couldn't go and visit him per se. I couldn't go into his home, so we ended up having a conversation with him bringing a chair outside the house, the porch of the house, and I was sitting and talking to him like that. How does he feel in terms of people that he'd like to be able to meet, but requires such a long process of clearance that he can't?
Well, that's a very grey area that you did, because that could actually be in breach of the bail conditions. Because if you must have arranged to meet in that condition, and that
we didn't. Well, I literally turned up.
Yeah,
yes,
okay,
yes.
But I mean, from the Home Office point of view, he's at some risk. And I know once he was popped back into Long Lartin prison for 2.5 years. We don't know why. Home Office obviously thought something was going on. Without any evidence, popped him back into prison. It's a very uncertain life all the time.
Mm. And so, you've been talking to people who are on TPIMs, on these preventative measures. What is the essential difference? Have you seen any difference in terms of how their lives are of these individuals who are not named as such? They're all given names as a detainee X and Y and Z and all these alphabets.
As you say, the alphabet letters, the alphabet names for people is about dehumanising them. I mean, if you say detainee BM isn't allowed to leave certain geographic area.
The Special Investigation and Appeals Commission say that it's to protect their identities. Is that true?
I think most of the people that have been on these have actually wanted to get their story out there and have their story heard. But I think in terms of from the government's perspective, they managed to use this to keep their identities hidden, keep the press from being able to report a story. Reporting a story on BM isn't as interesting as reporting a story on this human being who has a family, who has a wife, who has children, who is being horrifically oppressed in some cases.
Now, some of the people that you're speaking to, they're married, they have children. What effects does it have on their lives in terms of the children? Of course, if somebody has to be a registered and cleared by Home Office visitor, that would apply to children or to relatives of that child.
Well, I mean, even the children can't have their friends come over to play. Something as simple as and normal for a childhood as that, just having your friends come over after school, that can't happen. The children have to be vetted by the Home Office. And one of the most damaging things to the families is obviously within Muslim culture and society, the family unit is a very central part of the society, and you have sometimes the fathers being moved away to other areas. So I know in one example where the father was moved to Bristol, and his wife was left looking after 5 children on her own with very little support, and just the children don't even know why their father's not there anymore. All they know is that daddy's not here anymore. In another example, I know of a very close friend of mine whose children cry every time they see a policeman on the street, and every time they see a policeman anywhere, they burst into tears and have panic attacks.
So imagine if those police would just come into the house as a result.
Well, this is it. Because they've had the police coming in so many times, barging into the house, searching the house, being rude to them. Now they're just terrified of police. They see police as these figures of oppression that are going to take daddy away.
Bruce, you've been involved in activism in campaigns against nuclear disarmament and so forth in the past. You've seen Britain go through the troubles, for example, of the Northern Ireland period. Have you seen anything or experienced anything similar to this in the United Kingdom before?
I don't think so, because there was always a sort of standard of British justice that I grew up to believe in. And I think if you were contesting nuclear weapons, there was something out in the open you could debate about. And maybe there were secret things behind the screens. But here, the evidence is secret. And all we're saying is, bring the evidence out and try them.
But what do you think is producing this? I mean, the fear of a terrorist attack, is it really so palpable? Is that what people feel? There's really going to be an attack, therefore we must introduce these measures in order to protect the population?
Well, we've had ever since 9/11. We've had the war on terror. It's been a God's gift to the right-wing militarists, because they've got a permanent reason to arm, to survey, to look at people. Permanent. It's not like a Cold War with the Soviet Union, which you can beat the Soviet Union economically and then that's over. The war on terror is an absolute license for indefinite control.
And let's get this straight. You don't support terrorism in any way at all, but why would you, with your background, come along and want to speak on behalf of people who are suffering these abuses?
Well, I'm a Christian. It's a Muslim state, I'm a Christian, and I'm meant to see my brother in anybody else, not what colour they are, religion they are. And I was told to judge, do unto others as you want to do yourself. I think it's quite simple, actually.
Well, I know it's highly appreciated.
Really is.
What do you think, Kaleem, about this?
I mean, control orders are pure political opportunism. The government needs to be seen to be tough on terror. Yeah, and as control orders became uncool and brought flack upon the government, they were just rebranded as TPIMs. So still we're being harsh on control orders, but now these are control orders light. Yeah, so they're not as strict. Anybody who studies history, and Bruce, we were talking before the show that Bruce, you were in Belfast, you saw the troubles, what happened there. Anybody who studies history will know that internment in Northern Ireland only made the situation of terrorism worse.
Absolutely.
Right. Bloody Sunday happened after internment.
Absolutely.
Exactly. You're never going to resolve an issue of terrorism by the use of secret evidence, by the use of these sorts of measures that are outside of the judicial norms. All these things will do, if anything, is increase radicalism, inverted commas, and make it more likely that there's some sort of attack or some sort of problem in the UK. Bruce,
how do we get ordinary people? How do we get the man on the Clapham omnibus, as it was said in the days of I think Lord Denning in court? How do we get the ordinary person, the layman, to feel some sort of relevance to his or her life in relation to these cases and what's happening?
Well, I think the sort of thing you've been saying, the family effect on children and all that, and I think little A5 flyers dished out in millions with case histories of what's happened, half a dozen case histories of control orders, immigration orders. People are quite sympathetic, and if the bottom line is, if they're guilty, try them here, then that wins over hearts and minds. And I think that we're working against a mountain of prejudice which is being created about Muslims generally. That's true. But nevertheless, it's not just Muslims, it's others as well. And the facts of what happens to those children, I think, is really heartrending.
Do you think that there's a danger at all of, okay, these measures, control orders and all, at some point will be and can be used against the wider population, and we're sleepwalking into allowing this to happen, or is it simply...
Absolutely. We've just seen last week the suggestion that there should be secret evidence in ordinary trials. It's a proposal coming up now from the present government. And that's all creep along, isn't it? Secret evidence in ordinary trials. We're back diplock courts in Northern Ireland and worse than that. No, I think it's the beginning of it's a thin edge, if that's the old-fashioned expression, which I think is very dangerous. We should stop it now.
Kaleem, the guys that you're speaking to who are on these TPIMs at present, mostly British citizens, what do you think they feel is their way forward? What is their way out? Is there a way out for them? Do they feel that there's any hope, light at the end of the tunnel?
How can they have any hope? How can these orders are designed to destroy hope. They're designed to have no light at the end of the tunnel. The fact is that they can be renewed, that they're based on secret evidence. You're not given any tools with which to defend yourself or to fight these measures. And even within TPIMs, although there's this much boasted about 2-year limit, there are exemptions and exclusions within the legislation, if you read it, that means that they can be carried on beyond that 2-year limit if a judge says so, and there's a whole long list of them. It'd be boring to go through, but so even that 2-year limit isn't a hard and fast 2-year limit. So the fact of the matter is that people on these things, and it comes back to what Bruce was saying, what we were saying right at the beginning, they're designed to leave you isolated and imprisoned and with no hope for the future. And it's worth noting that the only real difference between SIAC, a control order, and a TPIM is the outcome of it. If you're on a SIAC, which is where they're trying to send you to a country where you're likely to be tortured, such as they're doing with Abu Qatada or with Mustafa Talib,
yes.
If you win that, the best you can hope for, if you win it out and out, is to be put on a control order. That's the only difference between these two things. Then you have to win a control order case as well,
yeah,
to finally get your freedom. If you're a British citizen, you start off the ladder one step further up. You only have your control order or your TPIM to win. And I mean, if you look to the case of Faraj, and inshallah may Allah grant him... Faraj Hassan, and may Allah grant him Jannah. He went through all of these measures, and every time he would win a case, they would just put him on the next step of the rung. So he was on SIAC, so then they put him on extraordinary bail. Then he won that, so they put him on a control order. And then when he finally won all of these things, after 5 years of going through absolute hell, then they released him.
That's such a stark case, because it's very telling. The Libyans, he was a Libyan, but Faraj Hassan was a Libyan who died in a tragic car accident, in a motorcycle accident. But had he been alive, he would probably have gone, like all of the other former control older detainees who were of Libyan origin, to Libya and be part of the revolution there that was supported completely tooth and nail by our government.
But I think the Libyan business is very interesting and a sign of hope, I think, because now it's clear that our Secret Service was hand in glove with the Libyan Secret Service.
Absolutely.
Well, why wasn't it hand in glove with the Algerian Secret Service or the Jordanian Secret Service? And I think you mentioned the man on the Cap Momda, ordinary person on the street, would say, oh, something fishy going on in Libya. Isn't there something fishy going on with the Algerians or with the Jordanians? I think it's a good point to push.
Of course, and I think it is an extremely important point, because the Jordanians and the Algerians, importantly, neither country has been involved in the Arab Spring. Neither has had a revolution, although for whatever reason. So it's the status quo is as it was before the Arab Spring in the other countries. And all of those places were places where Britain had said very often is a place we will not send people to, because they practice torture as a matter of convention. What does Mustafa think? about the prospect of returning to Algeria?
And I don't want to go into too much detail on an individual case,
Sure.
but I think the Libyan thing does give a little bit of hope, because I think even judges who are so-called bound must be looking and saying, well, I wonder what this evidence, the value of this evidence. And the Home Office, I doubt whether the Home Office sees the reports from the security services. They probably just get a report. This is a dangerous man. Our agent in Tripoli says so, so he must be. And that's the end of it. So I think that the Libyan thing should be pushed.
I mean, one of the real dangers of secret evidence is that if you, in a normal court case where a case is being prepared, the police know their evidence is going to be checked and double-checked and triple-checked by the defence. And so they build the strongest case they can. What we see happening in these cases of secret evidence, where parts of the secret evidence have been discovered, it's very, very clear that the police and the intelligence services, even though it's something of an oxymoron, but they don't do any work to make sure, to check out the validity of the basis of these claims.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, just as a very quick, brief example, in my case, there was a phone call to the anti-terror hotline, and someone said that, look, this person, I suspect he's a terrorist, I think he's going to Syria for terrorism-related reasons. Now, the government took that and the police took that as a verbatim serious issue. When we found out about that and we did our own research, it turned out to be a friend of my mother's who'd got drunk, thought, well, why has this young white boy become Muslim and now he wants to go travelling in the Middle East? Oh, it must be terrorism. And in a drunken state one night, had phoned up the anti-terror hotline, made these accusations, and then had phoned up...
If you hear something suspicious, just report it to the police.
And had phoned up my mum the next day and apologised and said, oh, I'm really sorry, I was drunk, I didn't know what I was doing.
Oh my
The police had never got in touch with her. The Secret Service had never got in touch with her. They just took her rambling phone message as evidence verbatim. And this is the danger of secret evidence. Luckily, we highlighted that, found it out and exposed it. But if we hadn't have been able to find that out for ourselves, that would have gone to the judge and the judge could have taken it.
This is Germany of the 1930s, denouncing people by rumour and they get picked up.
People, of course, will argue, the government will argue that there are, there's this grey area that exists in between where you don't have enough evidence to charge a person, but you know through your intelligence service, and we've got to say that the intelligence service have to count for something, however good their information is, it's a different matter. But they will say that we can't charge this person, but the threat level is too much for us to risk. We have to do something. How would you answer that?
Well, in Northern Ireland, we took the diplomat courts. They weren't perfect, but it was a different way around it. It was open evidence, at least to the judge in question. And I think that's all you can do. We have to be able to challenge the source of the Secret Service evidence. And as you were saying, it's worse to give people a sense of injustice and create them, make them terrorists, than to actually risk that one person might be actually up to some mischief. He should be watched and scrutinised all the time, his activities all the time, if he's actually is seen to be a threat. But I think it's a mistake to bend the rule of law and just lock him up because it might be dangerous.
The fact is, an act of terrorism can't take place overnight. If someone wants to make a bomb or obtain weapons, all of these things take planning, they take operations, they take money, they take all sorts of things that, to be honest, I'd have no idea about. But the fact of the matter is, if they're doing these sorts of things, watch them. We saw it in a number of cases in the UK where there have been actual successful open trials and convictions where they assessed a group of people, they thought that there was a threat there, and then they watched them, they surveilled them, they got recordings of them making preparations, and then they brought an open trial against them. The fact of the matter is, if this person is a dangerous terrorist, you do not want them on house arrest. If they're that dangerous that they could potentially do a Mumbai-style attack or blow something up, you don't want them locked up in their house. They need to be in a proper prison. But the fact of the matter is, at the moment, you can't prove either way whether they are or not. And in all likelihood, you're just locking up innocent people.
The level of surveillance that's possible is just incredible. You saw that BBC programme about the people who were planning to bomb aeroplanes.
Right.
They were watched all the time, and at the right moment they were arrested on evidence, charged, I presume.
That's absolutely true. As somebody who's lived through the period of the Troubles and so forth, can you just, in the last couple of minutes, explain to me any key differences that you've seen between then and now in terms of how the government has dealt with terrorism? Was there a right way? Is there a wrong way? Which is the correct way?
The right way, I think, is the political way. What is the reason for terrorism? Why do people take to these things? What are the causes? Now, it's not the only, maybe some are quite mad, but nevertheless there are political causes. And there are causes that we're not addressing in this country. Certainly wars in Afghanistan, wars in Iraq, these are causes. The Muslim community can see themselves as being persecuted or whatever. The fact that the Palestinians are being so oppressed as they are, and we keep our tongue in cheek whenever the Israelis do anything, is a cause. If I was a young Muslim, I'd think, bloody hell, you know, they're dealing with my community unfairly. I'm a Catholic. We suffered persecution for a long time in this country, and there was a great resentment built up. And I can see the political solution is the only solution. Surveillance and all this is important for the actual people who might be doing something. But the deep down, you've got to change the education and the causes of injustice.
Kaleem, what do you think is the solution?
I think we have to remember the roots of the Magna Carta. In the Magna Carta, it says that a free man shall not be deprived of his liberty, of his freedom, or his belongings without a trial by his peers and by the just law of the land.
That's right.
And these are the things that we're turning our back on. And I mean, I heard it said once that the lot of a democracy is sometimes it has to fight with one hand tied behind its back, because if you lose those things, then what are you defending in the first place? You've become a police state. You've become the one thing that you're meant to not be.
Become a police state. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. I would like to thank my guests, production staff, and you at home for watching. If you'd like to know more about these issues that have been discussed, you can go to cageprisoners.com. Please join us again in 2 weeks' time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.